The journey from the gentle slopes of Vodno to the jagged teeth of the Shar Mountains took only hours. But for Vedran, it felt like entering a different world. Here, the peaks didn't just rise, they pierced the sky. Astra parked the truck at a high-altitude pass where the grass was thin and the wind whistled through the rocks like a flute. Vedran stepped out, feeling the weight of the thin air in his lungs, his heart thumping with a mix of reverence and resolve. They began the arduous task of hauling their gear to the higher ridge. Every step was a lesson in endurance, the heavy glider bags pressing into their shoulders. Astra moved with the steady pace of someone who had done this a dozen times, her eyes fixed on the summit. Vedran followed, focusing on his breathing, realizing that the cathedral Astra spoke of required a steep climb before the first prayer of flight could be whispered. Near a small stone shelter, they met an elderly man named Elian. He was sitting on a wooden bench, his face etched with lines like the topographical maps Vedran had studied. Elian had spent 40 years watching these winds. He didn't carry a glider anymore, but his eyes followed the hawks circling above with a pilot's instinct. He gestured for them to sit, offering a flask of warm tea that smelled of wild mountain herbs. Elian spoke of the hidden breath, a peculiar thermal that lived behind the Titov VRV peak. "It is not a wind that carries you," Elian warned, his voice like grinding stones. "It is a wind that tests if you deserve to stay up. If you feel the wings shudder to the left, do not fight it. Lean into the void. The mountain rewards the brave, but it only preserves the humble." Vedran nodded, memorizing the old man's wisdom as if it were a flight manual. By noon, the conditions were as perfect as the high mountains allowed. Vedran and Astra stood on a narrow ledge, the world dropping away into a dizzying abyss of green and gray. The wind was steady but sharp. Astra checked Vedran's harness one last time, her expression serious. "No more practice runs, Vedran," she said softly. "This is the real sky." With a shared nod, they prepared to depart into the vastness. Astra launched first, her colorful wings snapping taut as she vanished over the edge. A moment later, Vedran followed. The transition was violent and beautiful. The ground disappeared, replaced by a vertical mile of empty space. The air here was crystalline and cold, vibrating against the fabric of his glider. He wasn't just gliding. He was suspended in a giant, invisible crystalline structure of moving air. Suddenly, the glider bucked. The left wing dipped sharply, and the bar vibrated with a terrifying intensity. It was the hidden breath Elian had described. Fear flared in Vedran's chest, but he forced his muscles to relax. He remembered the old man's words, "Lean into the void." Instead of pulling away from the turbulence, Vedran shifted his weight toward the drop, trusting the physics of the wing and the wisdom of the mountain. The wing caught the current, and instead of falling, Vedran was catapulted upward. He spiraled higher and higher, the altimeter on his wrist chirping a frantic, rising tone. He looked over and saw Astra nearby, her thumb raised in a gesture of triumph. They were rising past the granite walls, past the last of the scrub brush, until they were level with the very crowns of the Shar Mountains. For an hour, they danced in the cathedral. They soared over hidden glacial lakes that looked like fallen pieces of the sky and watched the shadows of their wings chase mountain goats across the scree. Vedran felt a profound sense of clarity. Every hour of training, every nervous moment on Vodno had been a step toward this. He wasn't just a boy from the city anymore. He was a part of the high altitude. As the sun turned the peaks to gold, they began their long descent toward a soft meadow in the valley below. Landing on the high grass, Vedran unhooked his harness and lay back, looking up at the sky he had just inhabited. Astra landed nearby, laughing as she collapsed beside her wing. Vedran knew this wasn't the end of his journey. The Shar Mountains had opened a door, and he was ready to see what lay beyond the next horizon.